So, Brad, I'm cruising around Instagram the other day, or the gram, as we millennials call it.
You millennials, huh?
We millennials. I mean, you olds wouldn't know about this, but we millennials call it the gram. Anyway, I'm cruising around, and I see a cartoonist that I follow on Instagram, and he's sharing his, first works. The stuff from, maybe not even the 20s, maybe even, the late teens. I'm not sure.
Yeah. How brave of this person.
Yeah, it's kind of fun when you get to see somebody whose work you love and they share their early stuff, and you're like, yikes, what a journey it's been. Anyway, the person shared their comic strip, and the name of the comic strip, Brad, was Googar.
Is that right? What idiot in his right mind would call a strip Googar?
Any familiarity, Brad, with the strip called Googar? Googar? Any thoughts about who that might have been that I checked out on the gram?
That would have been my first real attempt. That was the prototype of Greystonian. And I obviously didn't have a good title. And so I went with kind of a high school nickname. People were because my name is spelled a little bit funny, it's Guigar. I was constantly, if I would be announced in a setting, for marching band or whatever, my name was always mispronounced.
Oh my God, my heart breaks because now I'm imagining. And please welcome Brad Googar.
No, that's exactly what it was. I was a drum major at one point. I was the guy out front.
Oh, now I'm imagining all sorts of high school scenarios. So then we immediately cut to a week later. Susan, would you go to prom with me? And then the immediate response, no, Brad Guigar, I can't go to prom with you.
Exactly. And it happened so often that I just it became a nickname. People kind of referred to me as Googar. And I thought, well, that'll be a good title for this. And you know how you always kind of do stuff like that? Because we all heard documentaries or read books and somebody always said, oh yeah, the name of my strip. Well, it used to be, this person I knew called me this, or there's always a story behind the naming of something like that.
Of course.
And so what we try to do in those first early attempts is we try to retrofit that. We try to make something happen. And of course, it never works.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of trying to give yourself a nickname when you try to shoehorn a comic strip title that.
Yeah. You could just call me Lefty. It's nobody wants to call you Lefty. There's no reason to call you Lefty.
I actually, it's as much as I love and respect him, I always found it kind of off-putting that Charles Schultz would tell people to call him Sparky. It's I didn't give you that nickname. That's not one I gave you. You're telling me to give. All right, I'll call you Sparky. I mean, that's fine, but
I'll tell you what bothers me even more than that. People who never met Sparky who refer to him as Sparky. If I met Schultz and he said, "Oh, call me Sparky," then I would feel comfortable in calling him Sparky.
Right.
But then, especially when he died or when there's remembrances or stuff like that, people start referring to Sparky. I remember Sparky's comic being in the funny pages and bop. And you know that this person never met Charles Schultz, and referring to him as Sparky is kind of like a false familiarity. It's a pretension of having met somebody they've never met, just so they can make themselves feel more big. And that bothers me even more.
Yeah, it's akin to that article that I wrote about Picasso where I called him Pika Pika because I thought that was showed a little familiarity with the subject, as though Pika Pika and I had been hanging out.
Yeah, you might have been gilding that one a little bit much.
Well, anyway, so Googar, a resounding hit. How many papers did that land in when it first launched into national syndication?
That landed in my mom and dad's garage, where it sat for years and years and years, framed no less. But until my niece's high school graduation, when they were cleaning up the garage so they could put the kegs in there, and no, I don't think there were kegs. It was a high school graduation, but put the park, the picnic benches and stuff like that in there.
Gotcha.
And finally, it was we gotta take this down to make room. So now it's hanging in my studio.
And is there only one Googar original left?
Yeah, I think there might be, because really, that was I think that may have been, I clearly was doing it with markers and everything else and trying to do a Sunday format before I understood what a Sunday format was. Googar would go on to become the single guy. And the titular character of single guy was named Guy Gerund. And he was a single guy. Are you following this? Are you
this is
wrapped with anticipation? It was
this is
single
a $40
guy.
explanation for a 2-cent pun is what we're headed into.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of dumb mistakes we've all made, that was my big master plan. That was my first real tilt at syndicated comics, because I'm like, well, listen, all the comics that are getting picked up are demographic comics. They clearly play directly to a demographic. It's something that you can point to a news editor and say, if you run this strip, you will be directly approaching this group of people, this demographic, that demographic. Right. And we've seen it happen time and time again. And of course, what I tried to do was retrofit that idea. And so I was going to do a comic that spoke to all the single guys.
Oh.
And so Guy Gerund, he had he lived in kind of like a big apartment building, and when he moved in, it turned out there was already a creature living in that unit, and it was, as you might imagine, Pated the pterodactyl.
Oh, young Brad. Can I tell you, as much as I want to groan, there's a tiny part of me that is pleased with Pated the pterodactyl.
Oh, and the worst guy, you can see some of these. I've got them. I actually, when I collected the Greystone Inn hardcover, I went back and found a bunch of the stuff and put it in the opening chapter just to show, what came first. And the character design was so bad because I made this long, skinny beak. And then you know how pterodactyls have that thing on the back of their head?
Sure.
That fin, I made that long and skinny so you could never tell which direction he was looking. Because both sides of his head looked almost exactly the same. It's one of the worst character designs ever.
It's like having an earthworm as a character. You're like, well, yeah. I think I'm talking to the head.
It's exactly what it was. And people would give me that feedback constantly. And constantly, I would say to myself, these people don't know what they're fucking talking about. I can tell which way his head is pointing.
Wow, listen to how salty 20-year-old Brad used to get.
Oh yeah. 20-year-old Brad had a chip on his shoulder, let me tell you. And then that become Greystone Inn. And interestingly enough, the gargoyle, that's when Pated got replaced by the gargoyle, who's at that time, his name was Nigel.
Okay.
And then he finally became Argus, and the rest is semi-history.
The delight of seeing everyone's first attempts is so wonderful, because if I pulled out my first attempts, I actually have them in my garage. Now I'm tempted to scan them and send them to you.
Oh, you so should.
My first comic strip of length was in 3rd grade. And was called, Are You Ready For It? Well, hold on, I should set this up. You know my writing style. I like to write happy animals. Yeah. And they're kind of doing delightful things, right?
Yeah.
So in 3rd grade, genius that I am, I called my comic strip Doomsday. Yep. That was...
a young emo goth Dave Kellett. I love it.
Yeah, just me listening to the Smiths and the Cure off to the side of the... I don't know, why did I call it Doomsday? It was the weirdest name for it. Anyway, that was my first attempt.
Just sitting out in the playground, painting your fingernails black, getting picked last for kickball, and writing your comic strip.
Just smoking Marlboro Reds in 3rd grade. Flicking them right onto the grass of the playground,
Wow, Doomsday. And what was Doomsday about?
It was about a happy family of animals and a guy living together, and they did fun, goofy adventures. And it was called, I don't know why I called it Doomsday. It was the dumb, like our first attempts at anything, Brad, is like, it's so cringeworthy. But because it's 3rd grade, it's kind of delightfully cringeworthy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have 2, you'll be out here next week for NCS Fest, and I'll pull them out of the garage and show them to you. And you can laugh at me over a glass of scotch. That'll be good.
That sounds delightful.
Well, anyway, on that note of the long-standing, it's 25 years now running in newspapers, Googar comic strip, allow me to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making Googar.
and making a living from Googar. And by the way, the accent's on the second syllable.
Oh no!
If you're going to do
the biggest mistake to a famous comic strip that I could make. I'm so sorry. Let me start over again. Hi, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making Googar.
Thank you, and making a living from Googar. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, Googar aficionado, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon, and co-director of Stripped, which mainly focused on Googar.
And well, it should. And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comic, my friend. Despite the fact that you are a little bit under the weather with a cold, and I was up all night nursing a vomiting family, and so got about an hour's sleep. Let's rock this show today. Prepare for awesomeness from Dave and Brad, everybody.
Yeah, I went to see my son, my older son, run in the Broad Street Run, which is a 10-mile run from North Philly to South Philly. And that little shit does a 10-minute mile consistently. In fact, he ran so fast, we met him at mile 5, jumped on the subway to go down to see him at the finish line, and he beat us.
Oh, wow.
But it was cold.
He beat
yeah.
Brad, he's faster than a speeding train.
More powerful than a locomotive.
Oh, I did it wrong. Shoot. Oh, God. All right.
But but the whole time, you're standing out there and it was cold, wet, and rainy. And between that and the fact that my allergies have been the worst this year than they've been in the previous 5 years put together, I woke up yesterday, Monday morning, just feeling like 10 miles of bad road.
So I have to tell you, since you mentioned a 10-minute mile, when I started running 2 years ago, my niece was living with us, and I was like, "Hey, I finally got back to a 10-minute mile," and she goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, well, I run a 9-minute mile," and I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, but you're 21," and we have a treadmill in the house, and I caught her one time on the treadmill. She's like, "Hey, I ran another 9-minute mile," and she's eating a Snickers bar while she's running on the treadmill. And I'm like, only a 21-year-old could get away. Try that at my age.
Oh, yeah.
That's cardiac arrest is what that is right there.
You'd have a stroke on your way to a cardiac arrest and choke and die at the hospital.
Have a stroke on the way to a cardiac arrest. I like that phrase. So, Brad, we've got a lot of questions for today. Do you mind if I throw the first one at you?
Yes, please do.
All right. This first one comes in from Tyler Mann, and Tyler writes, Dave and Brad, in the past, I've done Kickstarters where the project is already finished and I have all the artwork. But what artwork should I be showing in a Kickstarter where I haven't started yet? Ooh, this is a good one. We've encountered this with some past guests, Brad. So what is your thoughts? What do you share when the project itself hasn't started yet, when the Kickstarter is kind of meant to start the project?
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I've got an idea. It's a picture of yourself holding up a sign that says, I make really bad decisions.
Wow. Yowza. The cold strikes us all, apparently.
No, listen, Dave, how many times have we had Jake Parker on the show? 3 times.
Not enough. 3 times, yes.
Not nearly enough, but I think it's been 3 times. 2 of those 3 appearances, he spent a copious amount of time telling us that one of the biggest mistakes he made was to do a Kickstarter for a project that didn't exist yet. Remember?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
And it had ripple effects that rippled out and affected him, from what I remember him saying, for years thereafter. It put him behind the 8 ball for a long, long time because this was a project that didn't exist. And doing that has so much danger, so much risk involved. Because you're working on something that doesn't exist. And so there's going to be a long time, even if you say that up front, you've got a real danger of having the people get antsy, waiting for their product.
Right.
And so let's say you're a web cartoonist with a day job and you've got a backup income. All right, that might be okay. All right, it's still a risk. But if you're a web cartoonist who doesn't have a backup income, and you can see this walking up Broad Street, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get that Kickstarter money. You're going to put it in the bank. You're going to start working on your project. You're going to have an electric bill come due. and you're going to dip a little bit into that Kickstarter money. Then you're going to keep going. And then something's going to happen to your car. And then you're going to dip into that Kickstarter money. And then by the time you're actually ready to run that Kickstarter, ready to go to the printer, you're going to have to make some really hard decisions like, oh, I was going to print it, really nice offset print on nice paper. Now I'm going to go backwards and print it on less expensive paper, less expensive inks. Even if you start at like economy inks and stuff like that, even if that's where your starting off point is, you risk sending something out to your backers that is not delightful. And I'm saying that for a reason. When you run a Kickstarter, those are the people that are in your corner. Those are the people that are most fervent about wanting to see you succeed. Those are your A-list people. When you send them something through Patreon or Kickstarter or whatever, your job is to delight them. Your job is to exceed their expectations every time, because if you don't, they're much less likely to become backers of your next crowdfunding project.
Right.
And if you lose your A-list people, you're left with a real difficult time trying to make your next Kickstarter fund. So you don't take chances on going late with a Kickstarter. You don't take chances on not having enough money to pay for shipping those books out to your Kickstarter backers. There are so many risks involved in doing a Kickstarter where the project isn't done yet. I really would caution you as a friend to rethink that.
I think that although I have a couple caveats, I think broadly speaking, I will agree with Brad. I think it is so much better to get the work done, even if it's just the bulk of it, maybe even if it's just the majority of it done before the Kickstarter is done.
Yeah.
Because the energy it takes to run a Kickstarter is substantial during the 30-day period. So you're not working on the project then. And then when it's done, it's 2 weeks till you collect the money. So now we're 6 weeks out. And what I'm getting at here is, to Brad's point, there's no income, or if there is income once the Kickstarter money funds, there's no project going out yet. Like it's a catch-22 of expenses chasing income and income chasing expenses, and it's not a great situation to be in. And frankly, I won't name names, but I know a couple cartoonists who got into real trouble because they Kickstarted it first, and then the money kind of ran out before they could print the book. And then they were in, they kind of almost had to do a second Kickstarter, if you know what I mean, Brad. They had to, not really. I mean, some of them did sales, some of them did a lot of commission work, but it can be a real, if you get behind the 8 ball on that one, it's hard to catch back up,
Yep, and it's a big temptation to dip into those Kickstarter funds, because you always do. Well, and sometimes you always think the same thing. You think, well, I'm gonna dip a couple $100 in, but next month things are gonna be better, and I'm gonna pay that back. It's like taking a loan against myself, and I'll even pay it back with interest. I'm such a nice person. And the thing about it is, next month something else happens.
Exactly. That's the thing, is that life gets in the way. So now here's some situations where I would say, all right, maybe it's okay. Sometimes there are projects that are cost prohibitive and you literally cannot work on it until you get the funding. And I'm speaking in this case of like when Fred and I did Stripped, Brad, there was no way we could have made, I don't remember the number. I think we spent like $250,000 making that documentary, right?
Yeah.
There was no way, Brad, I was going to go to my wife and be like, so I'm selling one of my kidneys, I'm selling our house, and I'm selling both the cars. And you just can't do it. So but to be fair, what Fred and I did was, I think we, at that point, had shot 30 to 50 hours of interviews on our own dime. Like he and I spent like $30,000 of our own money so that we had a proof of concept, if you know what I mean, like a visual to show. And when we edited down like 3 or 5 or 7 minute clips, I don't remember, saying like, here's what the movie will look like. And so even there, Brad, we did a considerable chunk of the work up front with our own money that we had no guarantee of getting back, so that people could see this is the thing. And so let's say Tyler wants to go ahead for whatever type of project this is, that he's like, no, I feel strongly that I want to kickstart it first and then I'll do the work. I do want to answer his question. So if you do choose that path that Brad and I would, try to wave you off of, if you do that path, what I would suggest is make everything, make all the visuals that someone would need to buy it as though it were a book pitch, or buy it as though they were saying like, I was sending Brad a sample of something he might like. Like, so you'll want to do the cover, You want to do maybe the first couple pages. You'll want to do maybe some character turnaround so people get a sense of it. Brad, any other thoughts on what you might want to produce?
Yeah, those are all good. I mean, mainly you're going to want at least the cover and one interior page at the very least.
Yeah. Just you want to give someone an idea that this is what you're going to get.
Yeah, you can always put a note on that cover that says cover may change, that not the final cover, stuff like that. People do that quite frequently. And they just put a little note on that. This may not be the final cover.
Absolutely.
Everybody kind of swings with that.
Yeah. And as long as you make a note of it, then people are like, okay, well, at least I know the ballpark that I'm going to get. Are you promising me Picasso painting, but you're showing me scribbles from a child? Well, then I know that this Kickstarter is probably not on the up and up, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you just want to show them that what you're going to deliver is what you're promising. And I think that puts a button on that one, Brad. What do you think?
Yeah. And then do your best to get that thing done as quickly as possible, because the path you're taking takes a lot of risk involved.
It absolutely does. All right, well, Brad, let me read the next question to you. Since you've got a case of the snuffles, and this comes to us from Alan B. Moore. Dave and Brad, I haven't drawn or posted any comics in a long while. My constant waffling on whether or not to get going again has brought up a recurring conversation with my wife. If I like drawing comics, why not just draw them regardless of if anyone ever sees them? I know where I fall on that issue, but I'm curious to know your answers. Brad, if everything fell apart tomorrow and you could no longer get your comics out to the public, would you keep drawing them for your own satisfaction, even if no one ever saw them? Thanks for all the laughs and advice. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice one. I recommend everyone end their question that way. Boy, what a pick-me-up that is. All right, go ahead, Brad. So the question is, if no one could ever see them, which is an even stronger form of if you never made any money at all from it, but if no one could ever even see them, would you draw comics?
Ooh. So here's the deal. I know that I'm supposed to say, yes, I would continue drawing comics because comics is in my blood, and I eat, sleep, and breathe comics. And if I were to stop doing comics, I would die right on the spot because I got to do comics so badly. I know that's what I'm supposed to say. But if I'm being honest with you, if I was doing a comic that nobody was reading, I would find something better to do with my time. And I mean that sincerely. In other words, okay, I'm doing a comic, and every time I'm posting it, it gets zero social media engagement. Nobody's coming to this site. I do a Kickstarter and it doesn't fund. And I take that information from that Kickstarter and I use it in doing a better Kickstarter next time, and that one doesn't fund. And it's just like, you know what? This really isn't happening for me. I would look at that and say, this certainly has been a great experience. I enjoyed it. I'm going to go do something better with my time. Maybe I'll write a book. Maybe I'll write a screenplay. Maybe I'll help somebody else do something. Maybe I'll find some way of being useful in another facet of all of this, using what I learned over the past several years of doing this comic. There's a lot of things you could do. Maybe I'll volunteer in my neighborhood. But there's a lot of things you could be doing with your time that could be bringing you joy and bringing you fulfillment. And I don't see the point in doing a comic that nobody reads. Even if you do get some enjoyment out of it, a comic that nobody reads is like a marching band playing with nobody to hear it.
Huh.
If a tree falls in the woods, does anybody hear the sound? I don't care because I'm not there. If I'm making a noise, I want somebody to hear that noise, So I read that, or I heard you read that question, and I'm like, I know what I'm supposed to say. And it's supposed to be a rallying cry that I love comics so much. But if I'm being honest with you, the answer is no. I'd find something better to do with my time. What do you say, Dave?
Well, I'm excited to hear that response, because that means that Brad You are this week's winner of the guy that doesn't truly love the art form of comics. That's right. Brad, if given the chance to bolt out the door, he will run like the Speedy Gonzales right out there. He doesn't love the art form. It's not true to his heart. It's not where he lives. It's just a vehicle for communicating to him. Just something else on the old chopping block. Yes, Brad Geiger, running for the hills as soon as the income in the audience goes away. No, okay. So I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised. I just thought I would abuse you for a minute, but
that's okay. That's okay.
The truth is, maybe you're right, because here's how I would delineate it. If I was not making any income at all, Brad, $0, right? I have to go back to working for Mattel designing toys, which, by the way, would be a lovely life. I would be very happy going back to Mattel. It was a great job. I go back to Mattel. I'm designing toys again. I'm not making any money from my comics, but I still have an audience. You know what, Brad? I might still cartoon.
You're Kobayashi Maruing that.
No. Hold on. Just let me finish. I gave you 3 minutes of uninterrupted talking. Hold on.
Okay.
So if I had an audience, I would still do it, because for me, that's still such an emotional payoff, right? It would still be my own little thing that I could have, and the reward would be the emails that I would get and the tweets that I would get, and I would do it. Maybe the output wouldn't be as much, but I would do it nights and weekends and whenever I could, and that's that. But if I lost both the money and the audience, I think Brad might be right. I think I might stop. What I would do is I would be known as the friend that draws the incredible birthday cards for people. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yes.
Or, hey, do you have someone has a wedding anniversary coming up? Why don't we ask old Dave to draw that? He used to love comics. Oh, wow, look at what Dave drew. This is great. I would become that friend. I would do it for family and school events and community events. And I wouldn't necessarily, because if you don't have the audience and you don't have the income, I mean, I still love the art form, but it's like, I love painting, but how much do I paint? I love guitar, but how much do I get to play guitar? I like, if it's neither the income or the audience, then as a hobby, it just goes down about 20 pegs, I think. You know, you still do it. It's still in your life, but you just do it less. That's me. That's my reaction to Brad. Brad, what do you think about my reaction to Brad's reaction?
I was worried that you were going to Kobayashi Maru that. In other words, you were saying, well, I don't make any money, but people are still reading it. And the real linchpin on that is whether people are reading it. And that's it. Once you lose the audience, or once you've been doing this for a while and the audience just isn't growing, you every time you tweet, you get maybe one like, one or two, and it's the same guy over there that's just hitting the button. Or worse yet, it's another cartoonist who's liking your stuff so that you'll like their stuff. If there's not a heartbeat, then maybe this isn't for you, and that's okay. Because so comics isn't for you. Maybe writing a funny short story is your thing. Maybe writing a novel is your thing. Maybe any number of things would be something that's better use of your time.
Before we make that disastrous jump, here's the thing. Maybe just that comic title is not for you. You know, before you go like, well, I guess it's off to novels with me, just go, well, maybe I try a different format of comics or a different genre of comics or a different title.
Yes.
Like you don't necessarily have to give up entirely. It's not an A-B choice. You can say, oh, well, Brad, I've enjoyed comics, but no one's really liking Sheldon. No one's reading it. There's no income for it. Maybe I'll just come up with a new comic strip. You know, that's a totally valid option that doesn't involve you giving up entirely and Brad Geigering out the door, you know?
No, you're right. I think the main thing is to stay fluid, stay flexible, and not to just think that this one thing is the only thing for you. And whether you take that to mean you can go from comics to writing novels, or whether you take that to mean, like Dave says, stop doing this particular comic and maybe launch a different comic with a different set of parameters that's more to your strength. Maybe that's what you do. But I don't think this whole idea of doing a comic that nobody reads because you love it so much, I think that's self-flagellation to a certain degree. You know what I mean?
Hey, this is a family show, Brad. Hold on.
No, it's kind of like masochistic. I'm going to keep doing this comic that nobody reads.
Sure,
I'm just going to keep doing it and keep doing it. No, you know what? You've got a limited number of years on the planet. Change a little something up. Maybe
exactly.
the next thing is better.
Well, it's kind of like sometimes moving the parameters helps you understand a situation better. So let's say, Brad, that I had a terrible romantic relationship, right? I'm 22 and I try to date and it goes terrible. Well, then I don't necessarily go, well, dating's off the cards for me, off to the monastery with old Dave Kellett. You know what I mean? You go, well, let's see what I can do different this next time. Maybe it was me on this. Oh, maybe I responded poorly on that. Okay, let me change this up, and I'm on to a new thing. And that's, I think, it's not a perfect parallel, but it's similar in the sense that, like, whatever, maybe it's the case that you have your own personal Googar right now, and you've got to find the next thing that gets you to the next thing that gets you to the next thing. I mean, my Doomsday was not a hit right out of the gate, and so
you're stuck on Googar, and you got to get to your single guy.
Yeah, I still don't know how to pronounce it. Googar, is that how you?
Googar.
Oh God. Googar. Googar. Why did you make it like a northern French pronunciation of? No, it's Googar. The emphasis is on the second half. It's not Googar. It's Googar. Yes, it's
Googar. That's just how it happened.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen. I guess I shouldn't be too critical because the whole thing just reeked of brilliance. So it's not like the title alone was.
Oh man, and the punchlines I was writing back then, holy cats! I was knocking them out of the park.
Oh sure, who among us wasn't at that age? So I really now that you have opened yourself up and shared Googar, I'm really going to find those old Doomsdays and share them with you because they are chef's kiss. Wait. What a treat! They are fantastic.
I can't wait.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
All right, Dave, I think we got time for another $5 Patreon question. And this week's question asker is Corinne Charlebois. How do you like that little French spin I put on that? Corinne.
I like that. Boy, am I in Paris? Because, Brad, that was perfect pronunciation.
Speaking of putting the accent on the second syllable, we've gone from Googar to Corinne.
I've always liked the name Corinne. But anyway, keep going.
So Corinne says, "Hi, Brad. Dave?"
God bless America. Stop doing that. I know that Corinne didn't write just your name. Don't do that. I have feelings.
There was a little ellipse. It was, "Hi, Brad. Dave?" No, it says, "Hi, Brad and Dave. I'm a storyboard artist for TV animation by trade, and I've been in the animation industry for more than 20 years. As such, I am really good at telling other people's stories, but I want something to call my own. My problem is that I feel like I have no stories to tell, or that when I do have an idea and I start working on it, either my interest peters out or I don't know where to go with it. My biggest hurdle on any project is just getting started. But at least when I'm handed a script, I know where I'm going. I just don't know about scripting for myself. How do you get started on a new story? How much of it do you plan out in advance? And how do you work out the details to keep going? Thank you both."
Oh, see? Both. She said both.
Yes,
Thank
she did.
you both.
Yes, she did.
All right. I just
both
needed
starts
that.
with B, and so does Brad.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump in on this first because you asked the question. All right. Yeah. So you've been 20 years in animation. You are a professional storyboarder of great skill at this point.
Yes.
And I think my reaction, and I think it's going to be different than Brad's reaction,
Mm-hmm.
I think you have a storyteller inside of you. I think if you have the ability to draw and interpret a script and storyboard it and bring it to life, you know intuitively at this point after 20 years the nuances of a story beat, of how to establish characters, of all the different ways you can establish characters. Um, but here's what I think is hurting you right now is that
Mm-hmm.
you have 20 years on the drawing side of things, right? But you have cultivated an editor's eye of what good writing is. I mean, you've been paired with probably some of the best writers in animation after a 20-year career, right? So
Yeah.
you've seen incredible script after incredible script come across your desk, and then you have to start storyboarding it. And then you go to turn and you open up your Microsoft Word file and you're like, well, my stuff's no good compared to that stuff.
Right.
And my thought is that you have a highly attuned editorial eye now, and you see your failings, which is good, but you just have to dive in because your first script might not be great, and that's okay. But your second one will be better, and your third one will be better still. And
Mm.
I think you will actually have a short on-ramping period than the average cartoonist would in their 20s or even 30s because you have 20 years of experience behind you. So even though your editorial eye is super finely attuned and you've got a great sense of what works and what's good, and right now that's hurting your heart, I think you will get through the early stages of learning very quickly as you start to work through your stories. Brad, before I go on too long, what is your take on this?
Well, I've got two takes. Number one, I am going to suggest that collaboration is something that very well may be on your plate. In other words,
See,
I'm
now
going to take.
I knew you were going to say that, but that's okay. This is a good
Yeah,
option. So keep going,
yeah,
keep going.
yeah. I'm going to take a little bit of a different stance from Dave. Maybe you're not a storyteller. Maybe you're not. Certainly, you're a visual storyteller, but maybe you're not a writer. And that's a whole skill set. That's a whole endeavor that's completely different than the drawing side. And it just might not be in your skill set. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not creative. That doesn't mean that you're not a powerful person in your craft. It just means that this is something that does not necessarily come naturally to you. And if you collaborate with somebody who is strong at writing but not strong at art, that end product is just as much yours as if you were writing and drawing at the same time. I want to encourage more collaboration in comics because I see time and time again just this sort of thing. People who especially in humor, they just cannot write humor. They're trying and trying and trying, and it's like I'm following this guy for year after year after year, and he still hasn't come close to the punchline, right?
Okay.
That's okay. But what it means is you need to work with somebody who is a good writer, who can deliver that punchline, and there's no shame in that. And so the first thing I want to do is suggest that collaboration might be a good fit for you.
Okay.
Having said that, okay, you want to comment on that?
Well, no, I want to jump in and say that I endorse that. I support that.
Yeah.
But I have a little caveat that I want to tack onto that. But you go ahead and finish up your thought first. Okay.
Right. Well, is the caveat going to be you don't have any skills that you haven't worked on building yet?
A version of that. My thing, the thing I wanted to focus in on was the part of her question that says, like, I want to have something of my own. And that desire, after 20 years of working on other people's stuff, that desire is real and it's concrete and it's a motivator and can power you through a year or 2 or 3 years of figuring out how to write and nail down your own scripts, you know?
Yeah.
So I would just encourage her to say, focus on the thing that you do want to have your own story, and it's okay. Like, let's say you've been let's move it to a parallel space. You've been an audio editor for 20 years and you've been editing some of the best musicians in Los Angeles, right? You've worked with all the bands, and you're like, but I would like to do my own guitar work. Well, it's going to take you a little while because first of all, you have that editor's eye right now, and you're able to see and respect the best of the best. So of course, anything that you produce is going to come up feeling short. But give yourself the gift of a few years using the motivation of, I want to have something that's mine. and you will get better with time. That's where I'm coming from. But to Brad's point, if you're okay with it being a team effort, and not necessarily being 100% you, but being 50% team effort instead of 40 people on an animation squad team effort, then yeah, Brad's option is totally valid and a great one, and one that I think he and I would both fully endorse for a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. So here's another thought I want to add, though. Having said that I want you to consider collaboration. So I just got done teaching my third round of storytelling classes at University of the Arts. And so I've been talking about exactly this. And one thing that I've found has been really useful, and something that as I was building these classes, I started getting into more and more myself, is narrative archetypes. In other words, we know that certain types of stories have certain elements. And if we know what those elements are, we have an outline that we can follow. And the most impressive or the most well-known among all of these is the hero's journey. And if you saw the very first Star Wars movie, you saw a tailor-made, scene-by-scene hero's journey story. That having that kind of outline is really, really helpful, because what happens is it says, okay, your story's going to go like this. And the outline is vague enough that you can apply it to Star Wars, and you can apply it to a romantic comedy, and it works exactly the same way. And you can apply it to a horror movie. Hero's Journey, in the original version, it has quite a bit of gender bias in it. There's a lot of, you assume the hero's a male, you assume certain characters are females. Filter that stuff out, okay, and leave what's powerful and useful in it, and you've got a really good structure. Another one I want to suggest, one that we talked about earlier on the show. I think sometime last year I talked about using a sitcom template that I use to go between an A story and a B story, and I'm sure you can find that in the ComicLab archives. But speaking of animation, Dan Harmon, the guy that wrote the Community, he did Rick and Morty. He's done a lot of talking about what he calls the story circle. Okay. And I want to put this out in front of you because I think this solves exactly the problem that Corinne has. In other words, she's got a story. She just doesn't know where to go with it. And partially it's because it's just that she doesn't have an outline. This is going to give her guideposts that she can use to write her first story start to finish. And once she has that experience under her belt, she can apply it to the next thing. Okay. So let me just give you a real quick overview on it. Okay.
All right.
The story, the Dan Harmon story circle has 8 steps, and I'm just going to go right through them real quick. Step 1, the character is in a zone of comfort. Simple, right? You establish your character, and that character is in a zone of comfort. Number 2, but they want something. Every story is about wanting something, whether it's a trophy, a relationship, a goal, a castle, whomever, whatever. There's a want there, okay? So step 2, they want something. Step 3, they enter an unfamiliar situation, trying to get that thing. Step 4, they start to adapt to that situation. Step 5, they get what they wanted. Step 6, they pay a heavy price for it. Step 7, they return to the familiar situation, but in step 8, you realize that this whole process has changed them. That's the 8th step, and you can see him, you can see Dan going through all of this. There's a bunch of YouTube videos. There's a bunch of explainers. They'll put up movie clips and say, like, Batman Returns. Here's how it goes through the story circle. Do some looking into this story circle, because what it does, and I've started applying this, the Evil Inc. that I've been writing for the past 2 years, it has been based on a hero's journey structure. And the beautiful thing about it is when I get to a place where I'm not really sure what's supposed to happen next, I look at that outline and I get an idea. Okay, this I've got to guide this story towards this next outpost. They've got to cross the threshold. They got to cross the point of no return. and then they've got to be in the strange land. Okay, I know how I'm going to apply that to this story. And I've actually got like 2 or 3 hero's journey cycles started in the overall writing of this, which is really fun. Everybody's got their own hero's journey. So I want you to look into some of these narrative archetypes. It's going to give you an outline. It's going to give you guideposts, and it's going to give you where to go next when you don't know what your story should be. What do you think about that, Dave?
I honestly, I think that's a great resource. And I think my own personal button on this would be for Corinne, and it's just to say this, and it's true for all of us, I think, is when you're feeling that tingling of wanting to go to the next stage, it usually means you're ready. In some way, shape, or form, you are ready to take a big next step on something. And so it's okay if it takes you 6 months to get to be ready to take that step, or 12 months or 18 months, whatever it is. But usually when you're feeling something wanting in your career, it means you're ready to take the next step. And so I'm excited for you, because whatever option you choose, and all of these are valid, it's exciting to hear you wanting to take the next step. And that's a fun moment for all of us. It's both terrifying and wonderful. Don't you think, Brad, for all of us?
Yep.
When we get that feeling.
I've told my students before, that point at which you feel the most fear is the point at which you're just inches away from your next breakthrough.
Yes.
So drive towards the fear. Embrace the fear. Go towards the fear, because I've never been in a situation that I had a major breakthrough just sitting there drinking a cup of tea, feeling comfortable. I've always had my biggest career or creative breakthroughs when I was terrified.
Yeah. And in fact, those moments where I've sat in stasis, I feel like I've actually receded a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't just stasis. I got a little too comfortable, and I got a little too, slidey backy kind of a thing. That's
slidey backy.
Yeah, that's an official term. That I learned that from Pika Pika. He was a famous artist that
he was Pika Pika's next door neighbor, slidey backy.
Slidey backy, yeah. All right, so Brad, here's the next question for us, and this comes to us from Carl Slimp. And Carl writes, Dave and Brad, riddle me this. What is preferable? What is preferable, posting once a week and knowing that you will never miss a post, or shooting for twice a week, but maybe having to miss a week here and there? Thanks, and love the show, Carl. Brad, where do you land on that one? Guaranteeing 1 and sticking the landing, or guaranteeing 2 and maybe every once in a while you don't get 2? What do you think?
I think I would go for the second. I think schedule in today's web publishing environment is less and less important. Okay. And we've said this on the show a million times. Back when Dave and I started, we had to update every day for a number of reasons. Number one among them is our readers were foragers. They were out looking for content. They were out searching for content and building bookmark lists and RSS feeds and so on and so forth. Today's reader is inundated by content. Instead of being foragers, they pulled their chair up to a mile-wide, nonstop, all-you-can-eat buffet. And they got their chair right up to the smorgasbord. And they're just eating everything that goes past them. As a result,
I like that noise. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you, but I just like.
They're eating and eating and eating. Okay, they've got more stuff thrown at them than they could ever digest. They're not foragers like they used to be. As a result, if you miss an update, and if you keep your mouth shut about it so you don't call attention to your own misstep, they're never going to notice it. You pick that up the next week with the update, you're fine. And they've got so much. Think about it. You got this person at an all-you-can-eat buffet, and your job is to give him cherry pie. And he's sitting there eating lemon meringue pie and an apple pie, and he eats your cherry pie, and then he eats a muffin and a Danish and a cruller, and then your cherry pie is supposed to be next, but it's not there. Does he sit there and stand up and flip the table over in disgust? No, he eats the muffin that comes up next, and then the donut, and then the next thing and the next thing. And when you got your next slice of cherry pie, he'll eat that too. But nobody's sitting there looking for your cherry pie. So don't get all wound up about schedule. I would say I would veer towards having having more than once a week would be nice. And if you can do that, let's say 40 weeks out of the year, go nuts. And if you miss a few, so you miss a few. You come back strong. Nobody's ever going to notice. So that's where I think we stand with web publishing. What are your thoughts, Dave? Would you do, which one of these would you choose?
I will be honest that I'm a little bit surprised, although maybe I shouldn't be, that you ended up landing the way you did. I really thought you were going to say, promise one a week, do one a week. And maybe that's just because I have echoes of your voice from 10 years ago in my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the more I think about it, you're right. And it's probably what I would advise because that's what I do myself. And I think you're going to be fine doing it the way that Brad outlined it. Yes, I concur. Really, my only hesitation is that I was more surprised. I really thought you were going to say, promise one, stick to one. And then you didn't. And then I got thrown off because I thought I was going to be the voice of reason. And it turns out you preempted me as the voice of reason. And now I have nowhere to go but to say that Brad is great.
I would have said exactly that 5 to 10 years ago.
Really?
Verbatim. I would have been fist to wood. Promise one, deliver one.
Wait, what? Fist to wood? What does that mean?
Fist to wood. That means you are pounding on the table. Fist to wood.
Fist to wood?
Haven't you ever heard fist to wood?
What are you hanging out with like deer hunters in Scandinavia?
You've never heard fist to wood?
No.
I'm sure I can't be the only person to have used that idiom. Yeah, that means you're pounding on the table in emphasis.
Fist to wood. Frankly, I'm afraid to Google that. Fist to wood. I'm just going to trust you because I'm not Googling that. That doesn't feel like a safe Google.
You don't want that on your search history.
Yeah,
huh?
I don't trust where you're leading me with that. I've just never heard that. I'm going to look at, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull out my 24 volume set, Brad, and I'm going to look up fist to wood, and we're going to
Does it include like idioms and phrases?
That's a really good question. I have yet to come across an idiom in it. I would guess no.
Yeah.
I don't think it has, because that could get gigantic, a glossary of all idioms in English.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find it in the Oxford.
It technically covers Australian, New Zealand, England, Canada, U.S. And so think about all the weird different little sayings that we would all have that dictionary would have to have.
That would be large.
And frankly, there's only one living English speaker in the world that still says fist to wood, and that's Brad Geiger.
Well, there's going to be a lot more after today's show because that's a great figure of speech. I was so angry I was saying this fist to wood.
We're going to get questioners writing in going, so fist to wood, Brad, would you say go one day a week or two?
Fist to wood, I'd say 2. And if you miss one, don't call attention to it.
Well, if someone else wants to take the risky click and Google that for me and then just screenshot the results.
The risky click sounds like an internet cafe bar that I would want to go to.
The risky click. That's fun.
The risky click.
All right. Well, let's jump into the next question, my friend. What do you think?
All right. That sounds good. So the next question comes from Kyle Rose, who says, "Hey, Brad and Dave, I've been doing an online gag-style webcomic for a few years now, Working Stiff Comic, and it's gained a humble but fairly regular audience. I post on the comics website, Tapas, Line Webtoon, social media, and I'm at the point I want to put the gag strip on hold to experiment with other formats and tell other mid to long form stories. My question is how to leverage my existing readership as I transition to these other projects. The 2 solutions that come to mind are A, just alerting readers of my webcomic that soon I will be putting the strip on pause and please go to this other place to find my new work, or B, changing the name, branding, etc. of my current webcomic on all platforms and continue to post the new projects in the feed where people are currently subscribed. Right now I'm leaning towards B. And while I'm sure some new readers will drop off, but I'm hoping it will give my new endeavor a boost at the beginning. My main reservation is that it might be too off-putting for some readers and who might come to my feed looking for my old comic, especially given that the new product will be in a different tone and format. Thanks all for the wonderful advice. You guys are amazing." Well, Dave, that's a big question. What's your thoughts?
That was a big question. So I actually have a couple of thoughts on this because I faced a very similar situation, I have to tell you. I had been doing Sheldon. Let's see, this was in 2007 that I started Drive. So I had been doing Sheldon for 9 years. And I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do Drive, which I was going to do as a long form story, monochromatic, serious and comedic, and set 400 years in the future, right? So very different from Sheldon. Not monumentally different, but different enough where people are like, "What the heck is this?" And the way I did it to start, and I think there are learning things that we can take here, although it doesn't exactly work for Tapas and Line Webtoon and social media, but we'll try it anyway. So with Sheldon, what I did was at that point, I was doing 5 Sheldons a week and I had my weekends free. So I started doing this thing called Saturday Sci-Fi Storyline. And I didn't even have a name for Drive yet. I just was calling it the Saturday Sci-Fi Storyline. And it was like a bonus. It was like, hey, if you were a Sheldon reader, you might like this. It's going to be a comedic story with serious undertones, and it's drawn akin to my Sheldon style, and give it a go. And I think I ran it for about 5 or 6 months on Sheldon on Saturdays. And then as it was going in the last 2 months, I said, hey, this Saturday featurette that you've been reading now has its own website. Go over to drivecomic.com and read Drive. And that's what it's called now. And it's going to be on its own. And then for another couple of months, I kept running it on Sheldon. And then I said, if you want to keep following the story, it's now only at that other website. And that's what I did. And I have to say, I worked really well for me. Now, does that work on Tapas or on Line Webtoon or on social media? I think less well, but there are elements of it that could still work. Brad, what are your thoughts?
This is one of the reasons that I am strongly in favor of branding your social media on the artist and not on the title. Because if you are directing your social media towards your personal, as an artist, social media, then this isn't even a question. You just start talking about the new thing the way you were talking about the old thing. So it's one of the reasons that I think your social media should be about you and not, revolving around a comic or a project. So that's number one. Number two, when I transitioned from Greystone Inn to Evil Inc., I did exactly what Dave was talking about for the most part. Greystone Inn stopped on Friday, so in the middle of June, and the following Monday, the first Evil Inc. strip popped up on the Greystone Inn site. And it ran with a note at the bottom saying what was going to happen. This is the new strip. This is what it's going to be. And it's going to be over at this other place. And I went like that for 2 or 3 weeks until finally, maybe on the 4th week, I posted something that says, this site is now an archive site. To see the further adventures of Evil Inc., you got to go over to evil-inc.com and read the thing. And I retained an awful lot of people. And I think you could do that on your site. I think you can do that sort of thing on Tapas and Webtoons. You've built a thing. You built an audience at a certain place, whether it's your site or on Tapas or whatever. You need to now use that thing. The only wrong decision you can make is to leave this thing that you built fallow and not avail yourself of any of the value that you've put into it. And so that means you do whatever it takes over at that site where you built a readership, and you point them to the new place using whatever trick you've got up your sleeve. You do that. And you can, I think what we're talking about sounds the closest to your option B, is just post the new comic on the site of the old comic or in the place of the old comic. If people are disenfranchised and decide that they don't want to follow it, fine. You would have lost those people anyway, right? No matter what you do. If they're not going to like the new comic, you lost them, right? So you say, okay, I'm acceptable with those losses. Now I'm going to concentrate on building the new thing. And just as an aside, because I think I follow this Kyle on Instagram, I just want to say this personally: you're making the right decision. Your writing is going to flower under a longer format. Right now, I don't know that the current format is to your benefit. But if you give yourself a little bit longer swings and a bigger chunk of storytelling, I think your writing is going to flower. I want to encourage you to do this. This is good news that you're considering that. I think you're going to do great.
Well, that's great. A little personal pick me up from Brad Geiger right there. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing good. And again, this is why, if you're listening, you make your social media about you, the artist. That's the key to this whole thing, because that's where the biggest chunk of all this traffic is going to be centered around your site and your social media. And if you are making your social media about you, then this doesn't even become a question. You just start posting about the new thing that you are working on.
Right. If you've branded it around you, you don't have to explain why Googar went away. You just immediately jump into the next strip. Oh, sorry. How did you do it? Googar?
Googar. Yes.
Oh, it's like Babar. All right.
Only not as well drawn.
Brad, I got to tell you, this is apropos of nothing, but I was reading a Babar the other day, and Nelly, I have not read it since I was a kid, and it did not age well in terms of a whole bunch of things. Babar, not as safe as you thought it was. Nelly.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
It's a little, you get to certain things, you're like, ho, I'm glad times have changed. Oh boy, this is really rough. This would not be written today. Oh God.
Wow. Now I'm fascinated. I don't think we ever had a Babar book in the house, but when I was growing up, there was a couple of Babars.
Yeah, it feels like someone was drinking a little bit too much at the Babar, and then they wrote it, and then that's the best joke I could come up with. That's it right there.
Well, listen, once we've hit that pinnacle of humor, there's nothing left for me to say. But you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been Brad Googar, the editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave Kellett, the co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we're going to say that twice. Patreon.com/comiclab.
So when you were pitching Googar to yourself, were there other alternatives? Did you have other options?
Other options to Googar. Well, I was very full of myself.
If that was the strongest pitch, I'd hate to see what the other ones were.
There was a couple other titles. One of them was it was a long one. It was this is a handsome boy who should date more. That was one. Girls, you're missing out. You should give him a try. They were a lot of long ones.
Just a lot of really sad, lonely cries for help from a young Brad Geiger, basically.
And actually, a long one was the third title.